These are both fuel rails and fuel regulators from a 1990 4Runner, Toyota 4Runner. And one of these 4Runners had a bad regulator. Today I'm going to show you how a regulator behaves when it starts to go bad and what the symptoms are. Quick overview. The regulator keeps the fuel system at a constant pressure relative to the pressure differential between the injectors and the manifold. So when you're at idle, your manifold is going to be at a higher pressure, higher vacuum, and that's going to want to suck the fuel out of the injectors. So your effective fuel pressure is going to be higher than the fuel pump is actually generating at that point. When you floor it and your throttle plate is wide open, you're going to have air rushing in. You're going to have very low intake vacuum, and at that point, your fuel pressure is going to be basically whatever the pump is putting out if it's unregulated. And if you have a turbo in your vehicle, you're actually going to have air that's going to be forced in there pushing up against the injectors, which is going to lower your effective fuel pressure. So the advantage to a return system with a manifold feedback, which these both have, is that your fuel pressure is related to the intake vacuum or pressure. So there's a diaphragm inside each regulator, and the fuel comes up here, and there's a spring, and this vacuum works with the spring to help control the amount of flow which is sent through this return line back to your fuel tank. They're phasing these out these days because the hot fuel causes more emissions, but that's neither here nor there. So if I hook this up to a good regulator with the diaphragm intact, pump it up to manifold vacuum, and you can see that gauge is holding pretty steady. So that means that my diaphragm is behaving as it should. Fuel is going to, be controlled by the manifold vacuum. On this one, the diaphragm has been eaten away probably by some fuel additive. I pump that up, and you can see that it drops right back down as quickly as I pump it. So that means that I'm going to not only have a situation where the the manifold vacuum is not helping to regulate the fuel pressure as it should, but I could potentially also have fuel coming through my vacuum line into the intake and throw my mix off even further that way. So it's sort of a double whammy there. So if you can also test these when they're on the vehicle, and if I pump, if I put a vacuum line up to this, and if it's leaking, I need to watch out to make sure, of course, that I don't get fuel that comes back into my vacuum gauge, which would hurt it. But I will be able to hear feedback from the engine as I pump this. It'll change the idle. And if you can do sort of a crude check with the same thing. If you pinch off this vacuum line and disconnect it when the vehicle is running, you'll be able to hear a change in idle. Sort of a crude test, but it'll give you an idea if your regulator is working at all. So yeah, there you have it. And unfortunately, when one of these goes, you cannot really service it. You just gotta suck it up and buy a new one.